After two measures failed in the state legislature this past session, another group wants voters to decide if Colorado residents with terminal illnesses can end their own lives. They kicked off their campaign on Tuesday with the help of Dan Diaz, the husband of Brittany Maynard.
Brittany spoke up because she felt it was an injustice that we had to leave our home. Coloradans deserve better.
Brittany Maynard ended her life nearly 2 years ago after doctors diagnosed her with brain cancer. She was just 29 years old. And joining us to talk about this proposal is Dr. David Hibbard, who spent more than a decade working at a Boulder hospice after a career as a family physician. So thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you.
First, tell us a little bit about, I know it's probably a convoluted law a bit, but can we summarize what this law would do if it were to pass under the ballot proposal?
Well, it would be afford a person who had a terminal illness and who was judged to have less than 6 months to live the ability to approach a physician and request a prescription for medication which, if taken, would end their life and their suffering. The individual has to be a registered voter, older than 18 years of age, and the requirement is that he or she make 2 requests from 2 separate physicians for this prescription with a 15-day waiting period in between, and then they would be allowed to take the medication. There are safeguards for the disposal of medication once the act has been committed or not. About 2/3 of patients who get prescriptions in Oregon use the medication once they get it. Fully a third of those who get the prescription don't use it, which tells me that there's a great deal of anxiety that if I have those pills on the shelf, I can take them if things get really bad. But if they're not, I'm just going to let nature take its course.
I know under the proposal there would be a 3rd written request after those 2 verbal requests.
Yes.
Is that about the only difference in the proposal than what failed at the legislature
Correct.
this year? This is a very morbid question. If I want to die,
yes,
why can't I?
Well, you can if you use your own methods. If you hang yourself, or use a gun, or starve yourself. Those are not very viable or attractive alternatives. So having this capability would allow you to, if you have a terminal illness and you know you're going to die, would allow you to live your life fully until that time comes when you sit down and take the capsules apart and put the medication into Jell-O or something like that and take the entire dose in one sitting. You'll be about 20 minutes until you're feeling sleepy, a half hour or more until you're fast asleep, and you just don't wake up from that process.
Now, I know there's concern with when people hear you're getting help from a doctor versus you're getting prescribed the medicine, that you need that doctor to prescribe the medicine, but it's the medicine that's doing it. It's not the doctor that's doing it, it's the medicine.
If we use the term medical assisted dying, that is more like what's really happening. The prescription is doing the job. The doctor's job is to provide that medication if the individual meets the requirements, and to follow up with that person, allowing them to feel that not abandoned, but that their doctor is monitoring what's happening. But the medication must be taken by the individual.
Now, there's a lot of emotion on both sides of this issue. Dan Diaz shared the story of his wife's battle with cancer with us back in February. Others say that laws like this violate medical ethics requiring physicians to serve life and not kill. So the Colorado Catholic Conference adding this: the voiceless or marginalized in our society, the poor, the frail, elderly, and racial minorities would be the first to feel pressure to die. We've talked a little bit about this, some of the safeguards in place to make sure that someone is not improperly using the law.
Well, you have to have reliable physicians who can make the assessment that the person does have the terminal illness and is likely to have less than 6 months to live. The fact that you've got perhaps 3 different people involved, the 2 physicians and the written statement, is, we feel, adequate notification or adequate means of getting to the point where they're doing it correctly. Let me give you an example. In Oregon, Oregon has had their law in place for 18 years. during those 18 years, they've had not one instance of fraud or misuse of the medication. Not one. That's pretty remarkable given the fact that it's been going on for 18 years now.
When people have to vote on something,
yes,
they tend to vote possible when they're making their decision. It's how it impacts their life.
Right.
So if you're asking statewide and you're asking voters who never have a situation in their own lives that deal with needing help, dying, how do you convince someone who's never experienced this or thought about this or had a family member that needed it? How do you convince them this should be a law?
Well, if you tell them that they don't have to participate in this, this is not something that affects everyone. If they want to stay clear of it, that's fine. What this law would allow is the people who want to take advantage of it to be able to take advantage of it. There's no coercion on the general public to take this. The instances of people who could use this medication are many. When I was in practice as a family doctor, I would get several individuals a year who would say, "Doc, you're going to take care of me when the time comes, aren't you?" And they wanted a reassurance that they wouldn't suffer in the process there. One of my medical colleagues, her father had ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease. This was about 2 years ago. It's a terrible disease to have, and there's a straight downhill trajectory. And he decided that before the ALS killed him, he was going to take his own life. And he tried doing that by stopping food and fluid. And it was an agonizing process for him, not a pleasant one at all. And his daughter would report that every time she saw him in his room, his face would be all gnarled because he was so thirsty for food and water that it made him feel miserable. Had this bill been in place and the medication available, he would have taken advantage of the clause.
Well, it's an uncomfortable topic, and it kind of needs to be for people to know what they're voting on. And don't be surprised if you see petition signature gatherers out because they need to collect enough signatures for this to make the ballot. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
95,000. Thank you
That's
for
a lot.
having me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.